School systems can be beautiful but complex ecosystems. There are the individual schools themselves and their interconnected layers of grade levels, classrooms, administrators, teachers, staff, and of course, all of the individual students.
Zoom up a layer, and managing the schools are the school districts, the umbrellas over multiple schools in a municipality, making decisions, establishing practice.
And of course, every individual school exists within the context of its city, of all the people and systems, the history, and the power structures of that particular place.
And if we zoom out one last time, governing the districts in each of those cities are the states, setting policies. These folks are often at a distance from, and sometimes even in opposition to, the students and communities on the ground. But these policies shape the entire experience of those students and their families.
As a parent or a community member with a concern or an idea, these school systems can feel overwhelming to engage with. So, how do you get involved?
A big part of it was I'd gone through all of these years of parents and educators, folks saying it's a challenge to get involved in advocacy. And so it really was about what are those obstacles?
That's Cardell Orrin, and he is highly practiced at sussing out the obstacles. He works in education policy and advocacy now. But for years before that, Cardell was a chief information officer strategizing and engineering large-scale IT systems.
And as a programmer, you always confront bugs in the system and you figure out, okay, here's a bug. I got to figure out whether I'm going to be able to program around it, program through it, fix the algorithm, whatever it is. And bugs generally happen to be people and departments and systems in the work that I do now, but it's the same process.
Now, Cardell is the executive director of Stand for Children Tennessee, an education advocacy organization that brings parents and community members together with policy and decision makers to develop solutions to the ever-expanding web of challenges facing school-age students.
Welcome to PathBreakers, a show about what it takes to cut through the noise and the red tape and all of the other obstacles to progress. I'm Tracy Pearson, and I work on the communications team at the Kresge Foundation.
I'm Jamie Bennett. I work at the intersection of arts, culture, and equitable community development. On each episode of this show, we talk with a different pathbreaker who's forging new ways forward in their community.
Today, we welcome Cardell Orrin to get into how connecting the dots helps build capacity and how empowering parents as advocates can better address the web of systemic issues affecting our young people in their schools and communities. Hello, Cardell. Thank you for joining us. To start off, could you please just introduce to our listeners Stand for Children Tennessee?
So STAND is an organization that is, our mission is to be a unique catalyst for educational success and social progress, to create a brighter future for us all. That's our official kind of by the book. And what that means is our job is to work towards organizing advocacy that brings together people from our community with decision makers to build solutions around creating impact. And we do a lot of that through coalition and partnership work, through working directly with people to make change and create differences and opportunities, especially in the areas of education and justice.
I want to talk to you just about some of your background and how you landed at Stand. And I think that you have a very interesting journey. So the first question I have for you is, tell me about Memphis as you experience it.
A lot of people come to Memphis and they say, this is a unique place. And I've been a lot of places and there are challenges here. And so growing up in Memphis, my mom was very active. And so we went to school board meetings and, she dragged us along there and to events in the community and all over. And I guess you experience it in one way, especially without a lot of resources and having to walk a lot of places or take the bus or, try to get places or, after school at the library and things like that. And so, you experience it in one way. And I went away to high school and then college and coming back. And as an adult, you experience it, in a way of, okay, well, what is this place and what made it this way? And so when I moved back to work in IT at a local Black college, part of the challenge was there's a majority Black city and county, and there's a lot of challenges here. And there's, leadership that is representative of the population, majority Black leadership. And so why do we still have a lot of the challenges that we still have? And so, for me, it's been a journey of understanding what's the history, what's the past,
Mm-hmm.
what are the themes that got us here. And so as I experience it is, how does this place persist in a lot of ways in terms of the status quo that gets developed? I talk about a lot of times about plantation politics in terms of
Mm.
the challenges that are created here. And so, those are some of the ways I experience it. And then in at the same time, it's such a wonderful place that's steeped in culture and music and history. And there's so much impact both regionally and nationally that came from Memphis, that still comes from Memphis. And it's really like, if you can change places, change the things that are happening here, that's a model for the rest of the country. And that is
Mm-hmm.
something that has been in the past and that I hope to be in the future.
Kudos to your mother for doing the things necessary to make you an individual who questions why things are the way that they are. I think sometimes people can move through cities and just see the end result of certain systemic issues, and they don't pause to think, well, why do you think it is the way that it is? And I think that as a parent, as a mother, as someone who's in contact with young people, that is a vital role to ensure that they are able to ask the question of why is that thing the way that you see it is today. So kudos to her. Big ups to your mama for that.
I call myself a cynical optimist. I call her an idealist
Mm-hmm.
because she's been fighting for, 60, 70 years in terms of making change when, she was a young student at the University of Michigan and fighting against apartheid, and moved on from there in terms of civil and human rights. And then when she came to Memphis, fighting for parent rights. And so that really created, the base where that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, because I was like, okay, we get dragged around. I don't want to do this. But, she planted it in me and my sisters, and that is the work that we ended up doing. And so, that is by where it was a modeling of things are not as they should be. And we can create that change. And it astounds me every day that she still continues to work alongside, the work that we do, and be a volunteer with us, even in what we push for, that she can still believe that, that things should be different and we should keep pushing to make them that way.
And Cardell, when you're, as a cynical optimist, there's a lot that's going right in Memphis right now. I've spent a little bit of time with Mayor Young. I know some folks are doing really good work there in Memphis. Rachel Knox over at the Hyde Foundation, and DeMarcus Suggs, who just joined the mayor's staff, and Nasa Troutman. There's a lot going right in Memphis, but it's still a place where there's a lot of stuff that's bad. The police, the recent fires, all of that sort of stuff. Where are you on the sort of cynicism, optimism? How's your meter tipping these days?
I probably tend to be more cynical. That's why it comes first.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of times we have a lot of the right people and positions. And then the challenge is in, can you connect the dots? Will we be honest with each other? Will we be transparent? And can we, from the sense of, no permanent friends, permanent enemies, only permanent interests, can we have enough permanent interests to be able to work together towards an end, even if it's not on everything, on a few things?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the challenges that we face have been faced for decades, and the choices that we've made. And a lot of times part of the challenge of confronting issues is that status quo presents things as a fait accompli in terms of, these aren't even choices. And so part of our challenge as advocates is to show that these are choices, that every day, every year, we are making decisions that actually are choices, not the way that things have to be. And so I think that, there are a lot of great people doing great work. And I think that part of the challenge is, as I think about it, being honest about it, being willing to confront the challenges, being both innovative and courageous in terms of how we do things that may be different than we did them before, and being able to, a lot of what we try to do is connect the dots, because a lot of times there are things that, that just don't make sense, that nobody has raised a question about, or nobody has said, well, this person is doing this over here and this over here. How do we bring those things together so that, now the pieces are connected, whether it's to create a path for things to move more smoothly, or whether it's to make sure that there's not duplication happening, and that, resources and capacity are focused, and efficient. And so that those are the things that we tend to see. But my meter still tends towards, I think, cynical, that we can pull those things together, but that's what we fight every day to try to do.
Yeah. And Stand for Children, I mean, you said connect the dots a couple of times, and Stand for Children is a connect the dots kind of organization. And one, I think, from what I know, that very much is focused on that sort of permanent values, not permanent friends, not permanent enemies, but working with folks to connect the dots. Tell us just a little bit about the work that Stand for Children is active doing right now.
Yeah, so our past, and I've been at Stan now about 11 years, and so we've gone through a whole cycle, and of course we're a national organization, and so for us in Tennessee, we've gone through cycles of early years where our focus was around parent organizing and engaging with parents, building teams, and working with them and advocating. And then a few years ago, we started what we called Momentum Memphis, and expanded that out. So now let's work with parents, but also educators and community members and people who are just interested in education. And then as we expanded that out, also started thinking about, well, how do we connect with other organizations? So it's not just about us turning out people with our t-shirts on and showing that Stan can do things, but it's about the collective, and collaborative action that we can take together. So, as a unique catalyst,
Hmm.
are there opportunities to bring those things together so we can be more efficient and effective in the work that we do together, so that everybody can be, more successful and impactful? So I tell that story just to say that, we got here in hopefully an intentional way in terms of where we are now, which is working a lot towards specific efforts around education issues. So we focus around early literacy, high school success, work, and trying to push those issues forward, both at the district and at the state level. But then also getting involved in youth justice and justice work has been something that we've expanded into both locally and at national, then expanded into as well. So that our work in those areas also includes focusing around specific policies. So you mentioned the mayor and the challenges with the policing. And so a DOJ report that in patterns and practice findings that have recommendations along with them, that now, the Trump DOJ office has said will not just not do anything about it, but we will actually try to retract those
Yeah.
findings to show you, to tell you that what you see and what was confirmed by the Department of Justice is not really what you saw. And so our focus is around how do we ensure accountability around the DOJ findings and the recommendations, because we saw them. We've been seeing those issues for decades, if not centuries, in terms of policing in Memphis and Shelby County. And so how do we have an impact on that and start to settle into what that work looks like? We also do electoral work in the work that we do. So we help to elect a new DA and new juvenile court judge. So how do we both work with them and partner to make sure that they can get the work done that they got elected on to do? And how do we hold them accountable as well? Again, no permanent friends, permanent enemies. We have permanent interest in terms of how do we move the ball down the field, and then also building coalitions. So we facilitate and help to form the Justice and Safety Alliance, which is bringing together organizations around a new vision of safety for our community and what that looks like, and the policies around that. And the Moral Budget Coalition, which is about, we have a lot of organizations, again, looking across the pantheon of work that, multiple partners do in education and transit and affordable housing. And we keep asking for more resources and investment, and everybody keeps losing because, we don't want to make the investments. We don't want to create new revenue. So we brought everybody together with a Moral Budget Coalition to say, you know, this is really a decision. Again, going back to those choices, we have to make different decisions if we want different results for our community. So how do we work together to emphasize to the decision makers that these are things that we have to do? And then across the state, I would say, some of the work that we do is around bringing together organizations in a network to focus around youth justice and what work is happening at the state legislature, and sometimes how we can work together to mitigate some of the harmful things happening, to stop some of the harmful things, and to also push proactive solutions for what we want to see for our young people here and across the state.
Awesome. I want to sort of talk more about the moral budget. When you say moral budget, what does a moral budget look like?
That's a great question. We didn't want it to just be have a moral budget and go do something that's better, and here are the values. So what we did was looked around and said everybody has asks, these different groups. So one partner is asking for more in public transit, one partner is asking for more in affordable housing and education and pre-K. And so we looked around at the work that was already happening in advocacy and said, how do we pull this together? Let's pull together what we see as a moral budget based on the investments that we want to see in our community. And so you can go to our website and see that a moral budget looks like, here's the specific investment. We want $10 million in affordable housing investment. We want $2 million in pre-K to get to pre-K for all. Here's what it looks like for education. We want, I think, $10 million in violence intervention. And so here's what we need for public safety, and looking at it in a different way and how we actually intervene and prevent, not just focus on continuing to increase the police budget, broadening out the idea of what safety is. That safety is not just about safety from violence or crime, but it's also about food security and housing security and the security of people, because we know that safe and secure people will commit less crime, that
Yep.
they will have more opportunities. And again, going back to choices, to make different choices, to be thriving people. So it's not just about crime. It's about all the manner of violence that happens in our communities and how we look at it with a more holistic view. And so for us, a moral budget covers those various areas of what are the things that we think, if we move back from a more kind of trickle down approach of, so let's incentivize businesses to come to town, or let's get businesses to come to town in that case, and then we'll get property tax increases, we'll get revenue increases, and then we can make investments, and then our community will grow. That hasn't worked for decades.
Yeah.
So our view is, here are the investments that we need to make to progress that will build both local businesses and attract national businesses. So it is economic development friendly. And so for that, we need public transit infrastructure. We need affordable housing, where we have one of the highest rates of need in terms of affordable housing across the country. We need investments in education. We have one of the highest rates of opportunity youth around the country. So we need to make sure that young people are connected. So there is an opportunity fund in the moral budget around opportunity youth workforce development. So here are the things that we know, if we make investments in these things, we will both impact the security of people and the support for people. So that's a base of the moral budget. But we also know that the impact of that will be lower crime, safer communities, economic development, the development of small and medium-sized businesses, which is where business actually grows and economies grow. And so we feel like this is not just, a moral budget. This is the most sensible way to grow and progress our economy and our community in regard to and in relationship to not just across Tennessee, but as we compare with peer cities.
I love it. And Cardell, I've spent some time on that 901moralbudget.org, and we'll make sure to put the web address in the show notes. But I love that the sort of reminder that a budget fundamentally isn't a financial document, it's a statement of priorities. And so you can tell a lot about a community by what they're willing to spend money on. I know Tracy and I wanted to shift a little bit to another topic, which is the state of Tennessee has some opinions about Memphis and Shelby County's school district. Will you talk with us a little bit about sort of what is happening there, and then we'll get into sort of what you all are doing about it?
Yeah, so at the state, there's an intensive focus a lot of times on what's happening in Memphis and Shelby County to create a rationale for creating state policy that will have a broader impact. And a lot of that is around a view of Memphis and Shelby County being a high crime area, being an area where people just aren't don't have value to some degree, where there's no education, where there are challenges that are happening, and it gets modeled a lot of times in terms of this is unique to Memphis and Shelby County. And what we know, what the data tells us, is that this is not unique to Memphis and Shelby County.
Yeah.
That in urban areas there are similar urban challenges, and in across the state, if we look at rural areas as well, there are similar challenges in terms of how education is being purveyed. We've seen some increases across Tennessee in that area, but certainly not enough that we should be proud and having a focus on Memphis and Shelby County. So I think when the state takes a look at us, they see, well, there's this tiny dot at the other side of the state on the western edge that is majority Black, that is majority Democrat, that we can do whatever we want to. And we can assert our power and authority over to create what we think it should be. There's a senator who represents a suburban area here who says that he's on a mission to make Memphis matter. And so part of what we've said is you don't have to make Memphis matter. Memphis matters.
Thank you.
We matter already. And we know the things that we want. So when we say that, as a city, we want to stop pretextual stops so that we can, intervene in disparities that are happening with Black residents in our community from policing, that's what we want to do. And the state came in and overturned that and said, well, you can't intervene in pretextual stops and do that. And so we will overturn that. And you can't have this type of revenue, or you can't have this type of local decision making. And so there's been a view from the state that we have to show those people over there what is needed to be done, and a lack of recognition and support for local autonomy and local power, which is something that, it seems like folks would be united in wanting to have. And that's not necessarily the way that it happens.
Hmm.
Yeah. And my understanding, Cardell, is that the state was proposing that they would put together a management group or something that could actually override the local school board and, could change things about charter school decisions and budgets and all sorts of stuff. But that's actually on hold at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes. So getting
How did that happen? Why is it on hold? How did that happen?
Yeah, so more specifically, so we had some challenges here, and we had a
Yeah.
superintendent who was terminated, and got a little messy between the school board and the community, and there were challenges, but those are things that happened. School system hadn't terminated a superintendent, and I don't know if it ever had. And so it's a
Mm.
challenge of how a community comes together to recognize and understand these challenges that have to happen in the public eye, and the decision making that has to happen from the people that we elect. And so those are things that should be kind of recognized and that get handled by the power of elections in a lot of ways. But the state looked over and said, "Oh, this is another opportunity," because they've tried it, for multiple years, if not decades. I mean, again, going back to decades now, to say that well, we should have control over what education looks like in Memphis and Shelby County. And so previously they had tried that with a 10-year experiment, the Achievement School District, that was meant to increase education, and of course, wasn't successful in doing that as the Achievement School District. And they looked at this opportunity again to say, well, there's opportunity here to use this, and they, it shifted over time about the rationale and the reason that they were doing it. And some of the legislators admitted, well, we've been wanting to do this for years, and now we just can't not do anything again, because the majority of money, again, the majority of the population of students is in Memphis and Shelby County. And so that's why the majority of money is here. And, Tennessee is on the lower end of states across the country in education funding. And so, as they utilize kind of the excuses of, well, here's where the majority of funding is going. And so we should, as a state legislature and a state administration, we should be uniquely looking at what happens in that district. Whereas, the challenges that they tried to bring up of education applied to multiple districts across the state in terms of the challenges. But the focus of this, so-called solution was focused clearly around Shelby County. And so what they wanted to do was to, on one side, it was supposed to be modeled around kind of the Houston school takeover of having a board of managers and being able to have authority over the school board, elected school board, in terms of spending, in terms of decisions that were happening. And in addition to that, the ability to be able to take schools and turn them into charter schools, the ability to expand vouchers extensively, more than they are in other places across the state. And so those were some of the opportunities, and to be able to have access and control over the facilities. So in a lot of ways, there's a concern that, the control that folks want is over a budget that's, between, 1.5 to $2 billion, depending on the time in federal dollars, over facilities that are across the community and clearing infrastructure and, land that could be valuable. And control of where students are going and what the access to education looks like. Not focused on actual solutions that might be around investments we could make in early literacy or high school success or middle school math and social emotional learning. The things that we're clear on, here are the investments that actually matter. It was focused on, let's take control, let's take it away from the elected school board. Let's stop them from making decisions, and let's have people who are appointed, not by local folks, but even local people who are appointed by the state. So then all the people who would be appointed are decided on by the state. So, where the clear level of accountability and kind of connection rests is not with the people who are local, but with the state. And so what we did as a community was came together and said, hey, this is not what we want. So we started a group, coalition with business partners, community partners, educators across the board, Save Our Students, Save Our Schools, SOS. And we pushed back and said, this is not what our community wants. And so, it got caught up at the end. It actually did pass the House and the Senate. It got caught up in committee. And so that's where, to your point, Jamie, where it got stalled. And so we stopped it for a year. And then what they also did was said, well, because in a lot of ways we can't create rationale around why we're just doing this to Shelby County. So let's do a forensic audit. So let's put $6 million into the state budget to do a forensic audit, which is similar to what they did with TSU, Tennessee State University, where they then used the audit to come in and take over and appoint a new board and have control. Where just recently it was announced that this massive $2 billion that the state owed TSU was now going to be settled for, I think, a pittance, 1% of that, in terms of that, of what was owed to this historically Black university in our state. And so they'll do this forensic audit, they say, over the next 9 to 18 months. And, then we'll make decisions and kind of create legislation around what happens. But they've also said, well, we'll have a rollout of information as we go. So what we expect is that coming back in the legislative session next year is that there will be something that they find and that they utilize as another rationale for why they need to take over and have control. Where, again, it's utilizing communications and what the public understands or doesn't to try to justify it. So, it's a $2 billion budget. You find a difference of $1 million or $3 million. That sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's all relative, and they won't make that comparison. They'll throw out some number and then say, see, we told you, this is why we need to take control, with no clarity on, why that will be impactful or supportive of the children and educators in Shelby County.
Tracy, I know you're sitting in Detroit. I can't imagine you're having any feelings about a state takeover of local control.
Yes, Cardell, I don't know if I told you I'm here in Detroit, and I graduated from Detroit Public Schools, so I'm very familiar with the concept of a state takeover and someone from outside of your community coming in and saying, this is how we're going to do things, and the residue that is left from that process, which is just absolutely terrible. I want to ask you, as someone who now has a student in the Detroit public school system, I'm a parent, but it's like, how do I get involved when I see that sort of thing happening? How do you get parents involved in coalition building and being more active in the things that are happening in their communities?
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great question. That's really the foundation of where we started at Stand for Children. I came in doing parent organizing. As I've talked about, we've expanded that out some, but not never lost that grain of our core is organizing how we get voices involved. Now, people might not always know the ins and outs of it or what happens or the role of the school board versus the county commission versus the state legislators, the commissioner of education, state board of education, all of these different places. So part of our job is to try to clarify and pull folks in and give them information. So when I talk to parents, it's, well, come out to a meeting. So monthly, we hold a meeting of our Momentum Memphis, and that is really kind of the foundational entry point. So no matter what you care about, you can come to that meeting and you can start to get engaged with folks around the table who are already working on advocacy efforts. And then we also encourage folks to go to school board meetings or county commission meetings. Just pull them up now online and watch and see what's happening to really get engaged and pull that process in. And as always, a really great starting point, even where we started, is getting involved in your school. So for parents getting involved in their schools, I was talking to a parent recently who was talking about building up more of their parent-teacher organization. And as they got more involved at the school level, at really trying to hold the school and the leader accountable of what's the role, what's our voice as parents, what do we get to decide on, what do we get to have input on. There was some challenges in that, and they had a back and forth and a challenge over the leadership of the PTO, and so all of those things come to play. But that's part of the engagement and part of building up yourself through that process as you go through the school and what matters to your child, as you mentioned, and then expand out to what matters to the children in your child's classroom, in your child's school, and then across the whole district is our hope that, that's how people progress and get involved over time. And how do we remove the barriers and obstacles? So one of the obstacles is I don't know enough. So we started having information sessions. And another obstacle is who else do I work with or how do I get this information? So we started the Momentum Memphis task force meetings to coach people through the process and know how to get involved in the advocacy, and meeting with school board members and meeting with commissioners. So really it's our job as advocates and as folks who want people to be involved as organizers to try to figure out what are those obstacles and how do we break them down, because generally the systems are not set up to encourage engagement from the public.
So, Cardell, when, getting ready for this, I was sort of reading about your work, and then I went to your bio and I expected that, you'd be a political science major or have done community organizing. But I see like engineering and IT stuff. Like, how do you sort of walk out of UPenn with your engineering IT degree and end up doing parent organizing and public policy in the Tennessee schools?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a roundabout way. I'll give you the short version, which is really, when I left, I was a programmer. When I left school, I was a programmer consultant. And then when I moved back to Memphis, being an opportunity and being young. At a young age, I was given an opportunity to run the department and be the chief information officer at Lemoyne on College, HBCU here in Memphis. And that's what really brought me home, brought me back to Memphis. And then when I left there, I was interested in consulting, so I started getting involved in consulting, which went from IT, but then expanded to strategic plan and community development, working with a lot of community nonprofits and government agencies. And at the same time, me and some friends just decided, hey, we want to impact our community. We want to get younger people involved, so let's start a political action committee. We had no idea what we were doing. We just knew, hey, we want to get involved in politics. We need more young voices. We need more folks who are engaged and thoughtful about the way that we conduct leadership here across the board. And so we started a political action committee, a PAC called New Path. And that's what really brought those pieces together, like the nonprofit social component, the political side. And then that kind of, led me on a path to Stand for Children. And because it was able to bring those pieces together, both the policy, organizing, human component, along with the electoral, and we get involved in elections, and that's a real benefit to bring to the table. But the way that I kind of reconcile those is it really is about, from an engineering perspective, about systems, and the systems,
Ah,
whether they're, technical systems, whether it's putting together a program, it's about what's the end result that we want and what are the steps that we go through to get there. What's the system that we want to see? And when people throw our obstacles in our way, how can we be consistent, persistent, and diligent about confronting those obstacles and figuring out if there's a way through, around, in partnership? What is that? And then from an advocacy standpoint, we're shooting for a goal and impact. And either we get there and we win, or we lose and we circle back and decide, is there a path to winning? No. Then let's go figure out something that is just as impactful and figure out how we get there. If there's a path to winning and it's just obstacles in our way, how do we one by one knock down those obstacles to trying to get to a goal?
I love that. And I'm thinking about all the nonprofits that I'd like to sort of turn off and turn back on to see if that fixes all their problems.
Blow on them a little bit. Just like...
Yeah, blow on their floppy disks and see if we just get the dust off. Tracy, I'll explain to you after the podcast what a floppy disk is.
I know what a floppy disk is. I know what that is. You put it in the little hole, and when you had the towers, I got it.
You
Had a little metal piece on it. Well, we still have our lightning round that I want to do. Jamie and I will go back and forth, and we want to just hear the first thing that sort of pops into your mind with these questions.
Okay.
All right?
That sounds dangerous, but let's do it.
So the first really difficult one is, do you have a favorite TV show or movie about public schools?
Oh, wow. The first one that popped into my head was, what's the one with James Edward Olmos? Is that that's not Stand and Deliver.
Oh, yeah. Stand and Deliver. That's a classic.
I don't know if that's my favorite, but yeah, that's the first one that popped in my head.
Okay. Well, Memphis is known for barbecue, but we understand you're a vegan, so no smoked brisket for you. But wondering if you have a favorite Memphis barbecue spot or one you refer people to.
Yes. Cozy Corner. I can't eat much there. I can eat the fries. But if I'm sending anybody anywhere, the people I trust tell me Cozy Corner is the place to be.
So we've got to get Cozy Corner to buy some jackfruit.
Right?
If you had to write a memoir today, what would you title it?
Oh, I don't know. I'd go back to what I said earlier, probably Cynical, Optimist.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
When out-of-towners come to visit Memphis, they'll hit Cozy Corner, but where else do you know that you have to take them?
Oh, I think the Civil Rights Museum, Stacks, going over to Soulsville. There's the Memphis Slim Collaboratory. I mean, it's just so much history here. But we've also got, great green spaces and parks.
That's awesome. You mentioned your daughter. What's the best part about being a girl dad?
The mirror maybe put in your face.
Love that. What gives you hope?
We facilitate and support the Youth Justice Action Coalition, which is justice-involved youth and interested youth who are focused on advocacy, but the work that they've done over time and the engagement, the challenges that they go through, and are still willing to talk about the things that they want to see in our community and can believe that there's better. Mm-hmm. And the idealism that my mom continues to have after 50, 60 years of being an advocate and activist, that it's just amazing to see that she can think the world can still and should be different than what we confront every day.
Your mom and your daughter, I love that. So if I picked up your iPhone, what's the last song you listened to?
Yeah, it's probably hip hop something. Royce da 5'9", Eminem.
Come on, Detroit.
Oh yeah, that's Detroit, right?
Yeah. I'm like, did he say that because I said I'm from Detroit, or you really listen to Royce? All right, last one. Who's a path breaker in your life?
I mean, my family, and I was remiss. I should mention my wife as I talk about who inspires me in terms of being better and being hopeful that I can be better, because she's stuck with me for a long time and helped me to be better. I think, those are the path breakers I think of. I mean, my mom, again, as she, went through and challenged her family and challenged, systems. My father, even as he was kind of beat down by systems and ended up being abused by them, that he could take the time to, be a forthright proponent in his early years of helping children to walk out, to get our first Black members on the school board, the crew I have around me. So I'm lucky to have a strong community.
Cardell, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about the work of Stand for Children Tennessee. I know you're leaning a little more heavily on the cynical than the optimist, but I'm leaving with hope. I'm leaving with a smile. And if we have more women like your mom, your wife, and your daughter, I think we're going to be okay. I think the kids are going to be all right. Thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Cardell.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Cardell Orrin is the executive director of Stand for Children Tennessee. We've put links to Stand and the Moral Budget Coalition in our show notes.
PathBreakers is produced by the Kresge Foundation, which was founded in 1924 with a mission to promote human progress. Today, Kresge works to expand equity and opportunity in America's cities.
Read the stories of all of this season's PathBreakers and learn about our grant-making and social investing work in Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Fresno, and cities across the U.S. at Kresge.org. To hear more stories from the PathBreakers, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Our producers are Juliet Heinley and Zach Rosen. Managing editor is Krista Yankee. Our show art is by Rochelle Baker and creative direction by Alejandro Herrera.
Special thank you to my colleagues on the American Cities program for lifting up Cardell and speaking his name as a truly phenomenal pathbreaker. We'll talk to you all next week.